Make sure my socks are in here.
Hi, I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Ross.
This week we're going to examine why we don't always see work from a biblical perspective. Last week we started a conversation about vocational stewardship. We kind of looked at how work fits into the narrative of Scripture. But it seems like we don't really think about work in that way. Like whenever a lot of us think about the job that we have or work that we have to do, we don't picture it as I'm doing work that's building God's kingdom. So today we want to kind of examine, why is that? What is it in our minds that prevents us from viewing most of our work that way?
I think one of the ways that it kind of impacts us is we view work as a way to survive. You know, we see it as getting the paycheck we need to live the life that we want to live. And it reminds me of the way I viewed my first paid gig. But I approached my youth pastor and said, hey, I'm thinking about this idea of going into church work, you know, like when I'm older or whatever. I felt a calling to that. And he said, that's great, you know, I'm excited for you. And he handed me basically the keys to the janitor closet and said, you know, would you be willing to tear down and set up before youth events? It became quickly sort of this work that just was giving me some extra cash. Mm-hmm. And I started seeing how I felt like, man, I wasn't paid quite enough to do this work. And, you know, I was owed more. I start cutting corners. And you just start to see work as it's really just about survival, and that's the only real value of work. Mm-hmm. Another way is this idea of status.
Yeah, this is a very familiar idea to American culture, especially because we have this American dream mentality that we can kind of start at the bottom, and that the object of working hard is so that I can advance my status.
Attaining and maintaining.
Right. It helps shape the way I view myself and the way other people view me, the work position that I'm in.
Yeah, so work becomes sort of an instrument of yours, focused on your own development or sense of worth, and it really, you just make work about you at the end of the day. And I think that's one of the things that gets in the way. The other one I think is that we see work is just about significance. And when we say significance, as people who love Jesus, we think, you know, if it's not spiritual, then it's not significant. Mm-hmm. And this comes from this deeply rooted idea in Western culture that goes all the way back to the Greek Empire. Mm-hmm. And that's the sacred secular divide. It's the thing that says there are things that are spiritual that are more important, and then there's like the earthly material things that aren't as important. And that's really not a biblical idea. And just think about two quick things. It's that, first of all, God made all that earthy material. Right. And secondly, Jesus came and put human flesh on because it was so good. Right. You know, and so so it's important to think about, how does the sacred secular divide impact how I see work as significant or not?
Yeah, I think one of the effects of that divide is that we think of the mission of God as really only being the job of people who work for the church, that they're doing really the kingdom work, and that that all of the work of advancing God's kingdom is relegated to those positions.
Yeah, you have sort of decided that your faith really doesn't impact your work all that much. Mm-hmm. It's the thing that supports the people who are doing the really significant work. Right. There's a brilliant woman named Dorothy Sayers, and she puts it like this, and I'm just going to read this quote from her. She says, "The church's approach to an intelligent carpenter, someone who's, not a pastor, is usually confined to exhorting him not to be drunk and disorderly in his leisure hours and to come to church on Sundays. What the church should be telling him is this, that the very first demand that his religion makes upon him is that he should make good tables." And she asked the question before that, is, how can anyone remain interested in a religion which seems to have no concern with 9/10 of his life? And I think that's a big barrier for why we don't see the biblical view of work. So we've kind of got this sacred secular divide mentality that that kind of is subconscious,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't quite see its effects in our day-to-day work.
Right.
And so our faith starts to get separated from our work, which actually results in the church being kind of irrelevant to most of life.
Right. Because I'm spending most of my time and energy doing my occupation, whether it's a job or I'm a student or I'm a stay-at-home parent.
Right.
And so if the church isn't, if my faith isn't, informing me of how that energy and time being spent is relevant to what God is doing in the world, then there's this big disconnect there.
That's right. Yeah, and I think we can also, as Christians, think of our work as a platform for sharing our faith with people. That's the real value that I can bring to my workplace, is if I just talk about Jesus.
Right.
I think that's important, obviously. We should do that. But it misses the reality that your work that you actually do contributes to that idea of progressing towards what God is doing in the world.
Right.
And so we need to be careful about that as well.